Welcome to the Grow Your Practice podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Chad Madden, owner of Madden Physical Therapy and Breakthrough. Join me each week as we dive into the best practices, systems, principles, tips, and tricks to help you grow your private practice.
Hey everybody, Chad Madden here with the Grow Your Practice podcast, and very excited for this episode. We have Dr. Ben Englund. Welcome to the podcast here.
Hey, thanks, Chad, for having me on. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, very much appreciate your time. And also, you did not ask me to say this, but you were an absolutely amazing host on the Torrentia call here. Is it called the Inside Circle call, or what do you call it?
Yeah, it's one of our inner circle or live Q&A just in our Torrentia Tribe. So thanks for being on there with Carl.
Nice. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So hopefully I can return the favor here and be half of a gracious as host as you were. But yeah, let's get rolling with so your DPT. You have a very storied career already as a clinician. How did you get started in physical therapy? When did you know that you were going to become a physical therapist?
Yeah, so just like most physical therapists, high school injuries, delayed, collegiate aspirations because of, the typical knee injury, didn't have the right training, didn't have the right mentor, didn't have the right coach to kind of walk me through that rehab process, and ended up not playing sports in college. But I was really inspired by some of my fellow physical therapists. One of the original DPT classes at Shenandoah University, Mark DeGarmo, he was kind of a big, forerunner of, hey, like physical therapy is a growing doctoral profession. You should check it out. Got into medical school, couldn't get my wife to move to Philadelphia for med school. And I went to physical therapy school. So I love every day of it.
Nice. What was your sport?
Soccer. So I love doing the flip throws and, really being a defensive person. And I wasn't very tall for offense, but I definitely could hold my own on defense.
Are you from Pennsylvania originally?
I am not, but I did grow up a lot near the Pittsburgh area, so halfway between Columbus and Pittsburgh. Kind of on that eastern Ohio, seaboard there.
Yeah, that's great.
The Ohio River.
Been through there quite a few times. That's awesome. I didn't know you were that close. That's
yeah,
that's cool.
Exit 132 off State Route 70 is Thornville, Ohio. The Lost Lands Music Festival's there. That's where I grew up. So
that's awesome, man. Can you give us a little bit of your journey that once you graduated, got your DPT, what did early clinical life look like for you, and how did you take the journey to where you are today? Because it seems like you have a million irons in the fire, like many of us do. But yeah, if you can update us on that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to help patients in pain. So actually, I got into one of the local hospitals here. They had an oncology residency that they were starting at the time. The APTA was really pushing kind of a board specialty in oncology, and I really wanted to help that hospital system go through that. The program ended up not going to fruition, but I did work a lot with patients who were on the oncology floor, and I worked with an individual. She was an acupuncturist, and many patients in the hospice and palliative care world, they would choose to see the acupuncturist over pain meds. And it really introduced this idea to me that needles could be used for pain management, which then as a physical therapist sent my rabbit hole down the dry needling trail. Actually taught, across the country and other countries, dry needling in various continuing education capacities. And I really was fascinated with this idea that you can take modalities or tools and help patients in a way that's different than surgery or drugs. And like most of us, we really, push that in the physical therapy world, but having the right tool for the right patient, I would see patients have massive changes in single sessions or multiple sessions. And I started out, like I said, hospital, transitioned into a local private practice. I started with a startup, and then I went over to a practice that had been seasoned for, about 15, 20 years. And then from there, I worked in a physician-owned practice. I got to see kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly there. And then really went in all cash, a couple of years ago, and I haven't looked back. So that's kind of my genesis of, hospital model, insurance, outpatient model to physician-owned practice model to cash model. I've kind of seen the gambit.
Nice. And in the cash model, that's your own practice today?
It is. Yep. So Pursuit Health and Wellness here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That's where I practice now.
Nice. So yeah, let's talk about technology next. In your prep, I saw that you wrote about, why clinicians are adding technology to their practice. Walk us through that. How do you think and why do you think this shift is happening within the market? Is it just a trend? Is it a fad? Or is there something deeper going on with patient expectations?
Yeah, I think now we're in a very much in a world that's evolving in healthcare. I think many of our consumers, i.e., our patients, are actually more informed on some of these advanced technologies via social media channels, with the use of artificial intelligence. I mean, our patients are getting more and more informed. I mean, I think in school, many of us were taught maybe to really, write things or talk to your patients between a sixth and an eighth grade reading level. Well, now with artificial intelligence and seeing the education, skyrocket on the consumer-facing side, many of our patients are coming in and asking for red light. They're asking for cold plunge. They're asking for sauna, and they're more informed on the science behind it than many providers are. So I don't think it's a fad. I don't think it's going anywhere because people are really in this mindset of biohacking. They're in this mindset of, I don't want to die young. We're seeing more and more millennials and younger individuals actually stopping the consumption of alcohol. You're seeing these bars pop up across the country that are non-alcoholic bars or mocktail bars. I mean, there's this growing movement of people being well informed of their care, but people also don't want to spend 6 months doing rehab anymore. They don't want to spend 5 months doing rehab anymore for their headaches or their back pain. So adding these technologies to your practice doesn't just scratch the itch of the consumer facing side of patients are well informed of these technologies or advanced technologies, but it also helps in terms of outcomes and efficiency. Many people are paying fee for service now for healthcare because deductibles have gone up so much. I think locally the average visit cost is about $270 for a traditional, outpatient physical therapy model until somebody's deductible is met at a hospital. Well, now with that, people can pay $100 less per visit, $200 less per visit in some markets and receive better quality care and spend more time with the provider, which we know per evidence-based guidelines actually gets to our outcomes faster, having that therapeutic alliance with our patients.
Yeah, that's great. Two big directions we can go into here. Let's talk about first, the treatment technologies. I can recall 10, 12 years ago within our industry talking about there will come a day where we have to add, we just used to call them cash pay services, behind the core service. And I know a lot of practice at the time were like, should I do this or not? And then over the last few years, that has really shifted where I would guess that 80% of practices have at least one attempt into rolling out a cash pay service for the business side and also for better patient outcomes. Can you talk about, within your tribe, how you're helping owners really roll it out, how they're getting utilization, and maybe share one or two of the pitfalls that you see that a lot of owners are making as well?
Yeah, so I think what we've tried to do with a lot of the Torrentia content is we want individuals and practice owners to be able to send either themselves or somebody in their practice to a weekend course, and they're able to sample the science and the why behind almost every available technology on the market. I mean, we've got ARP wave and multi-waveform technologies, focused and radial shockwave. We've got photobiomodulation helmets, class 3 and class 4 lasers, electric dry needling. So all of these services that are cash, pay in most models. And we're really trying to teach everybody what's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what's the down and dirty to go back Monday morning and implement this technology into my practice. And rather than having a separate laser course, a separate shockwave course, a separate needling course, we put it all together in one package. And then we really created a lot of online content for providers because you don't master it in a weekend, but for 6 months, people get access to the training over and over and over again. So if maybe they were a little fuzzy on, well, what's the science, or maybe it takes them 2 months to add that technology to their clinic, maybe they've got hyperbaric oxygen and there's a building permits and a build out that have to take place. What's been 2-3 months since the course, you don't always have the benefit of going back and looking at the science. And now you're ready to roll, but you don't know where to start. So we wanted medical practice owners in general, or rehab practice owners, to look at this and say, hey, in one course, I could add any technology that I want to my practice and know the science of why. Because, we talked about that on our episode a little bit, Chad, is it's integrity selling. You're selling to your patients with integrity that what you're talking to them about does have evidence and validity. And that's really where, I think a lot of providers say, well, I don't really want to push CAF services, and the provider becomes the limitation, but the science is there. And we're really trying to give practitioners the ammunition and tools to be able to go back and implement that immediately.
Yeah, let's stay on that for a second. Earlier this year, I was on a board with where are we at? CSM. It was Gary Calabrese from the Cleveland Clinic
Mhm.
in your neck of the woods, and then also Kevin Wilk, who everybody's familiar with, and
Yep.
it was and we were talking about this topic, rolling out treatment technologies, and they both, and there was tremendous agreement on this, and I believe they were specifically talking about direct current and the massive amount of scientific research behind this, and they were like, anybody that has this type of deficit, any sort of neuromuscular deficit in any way, coordination deficit, we're putting them on what I kind of qualified as e-stim. And I was embarrassed to be on the board because I was like, I haven't used e-stim in years. I just kind of put it in this bucket
Sure.
and thought the evidence was against it, and they were like, absolutely not. So I know you've published a paper recently. Can you
Mhm.
talk about that work and how you help clinicians, overcome their grandfatheredness like I have?
Yeah, no, you're good. So, my colleague, Dr. Raymond Butts, and I had the privilege of publishing with Dr. Mark Masters. He's the former department chair of physics at Purdue University. And really, we studied this multi-waveform device. We compared 3 or 4 of the mainstream direct current devices. I'll leave their names, off of it, but we really looked at which of them is better, and is there any evidence or science behind it. And before we did that,
Is it in the paper?
it is in the paper.
And you can share it. You can send it.
So we looked at ARPWave, Newbie, the Globus Phoenix. We kind of looked at all the multi-waveform devices. We took it to the review board, the IRB process, as you know, and they said, hey, we don't really know if electrical modalities are evidence-based or not. We thought that stuff was gone. So to your point, we then went back and wrote a prequel, which we called part 1 of those paper series. And we did the largest, I think it's over 350 or 400 studies that we looked at in that review. And we just published it in the Journal of Bodywork and Movement. And we found that there is some solid evidence for microcurrent. There is evidence for TENS at certain times. There's evidence for direct current. There's evidence for high pulsed galvanic, current, pulsed galvanic vestibular stimulation with electricity, brain stimulation. And we really looked at, well, here are all the single waveform technologies that work. And then we had to pitch, well, now these are these multi-waveform devices or direct current devices that introduce all these frequencies. Even Chattanooga has their VMS device, and they're trying to introduce multiple iterations of those waveforms. And we're really trying to teach providers, hey, you don't have to throw this stuff out the window. In fact, Joe Rogan was just talking about on his podcast, he used a multi-waveform direct current device and it cured his back issue. And he saw surgeons and specialists and therapists, and he's got the best care possible in Las Vegas. And he said this silly electrical device fixed him. And it really is amazing what we're seeing. And Mike Tyson as well. I was at the Mike Tyson fight back in November. Team Tyson was huge with ARPWave, it was posted all over their social media. And Tyson attributes his rapid recovery and re-rise to fame to the direct current devices.
Cool. So you mentioned something earlier too that I want to go back to. A lot of owners, they are the block. And I can remember when we were first, so maybe like 2017, rolling out cash pay services. And even for myself, and I've had a little bit of sales training along the way, how unnerving it was for me to say, oh, you're going to need 6 sessions of this, and that's $300. How do you want to handle that? That it was something that I had to work through. How are you doing that with your group? How are you helping owners who do have that visceral gut feeling of sales prevention? And by just full transparency, today I view it as a disservice if I'm withholding, like recommending something because of monetary or financial issue, that if I really believe this is going to help the person and I don't recommend it, then that's a fault of mine, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, can you talk through how you help owners overcome that hurdle?
Yeah, a couple of the things that we've done is within our tribe, we offer any of our certification people a free, how to monetize technology course. So we have a crash course in how do you implement the system? How do you get, ABN form signed? How do you have that conversation with patients? How do you train your sales staff or your front desk staff to have that conversation with patients if they ask preemptively? But really giving providers the confidence in the science. Even with things like dry needling, you've probably seen this in your own practice. You do a dry needling treatment and you're like, this is going to work, and it doesn't work. Well, then the provider starts to question the treatment methodology, and then they start questioning the validity of the actual technique when reality, it might be their skills that are limiting them. I actually ran into this with our first light force laser back when it was light cure. I think the first practice I was in 2017 or 16, we bought our first device. I think it was the 25-watt unit. I mean, it was big stuff back then. And I remember doing my first treatment, and I think I did it for 20 seconds. And I was like, oh yeah, this is going to fix your back pain. And then the patient came in, I don't feel any better. Why did I pay for that? Well, then I started looking, well, maybe I underdosed it. Now they've got their perfect protocol built in and some of those other features. But sometimes it's the provider's knowledge that's the void in their confidence to be able to implement it into practice. Because when they see results, it's easy to sell.
Yeah.
When they're not seeing results, it's really difficult to sell something that they don't believe in. And we're really giving them all the ammunition for every advanced technology that they could monetize in their practice, in a way where, look, the science is there. Here's how to perfect your dose. Now do it with your patients.
Yeah. Yeah. I only because I get to look at a bell curve of applications and clinicians' ability to do that. In the beginning, one misstep with a patient not producing a semi-miraculous result almost always derails that clinician from implementation. We had one clinician who just crushed it out of the gate, had one patient who had a minor upset, and what I would consider very minor. And that clinician stopped presenting that modality completely. It was unreal. I mean, it
Wow.
fell off a cliff to a zero, and then we worked through it. But yeah, tough stuff. Uh,
Yep.
so another one that at least is on the radar for most of the clinicians that we're talking with is this idea of ROI. How do you balance the conversation between patient outcomes and also, simply put, better business math for the practice?
Sure.
Yeah. What does that look
Yeah. Well, I think the first place to start is, one, how many providers do you have that will be utilizing that technology? Obviously, the more providers that are trained in your practice, I mean, I don't know how many clinicians you have in your practice, Chad, but if
like?
you've got
42?
Yeah. So if you've got 42 providers in one device and everybody recommends one patient per week, well, then you quickly fill the schedule of that device for a week, assuming, hour-long appointments. However, with that, with those, patients, you have to have the number of providers to justify filling that schedule. So some clinics I've seen go all in, they buy 6 devices and they've got 6 clinicians. I would start small, take bite-sized pieces with it. But for those that, have the infrastructure and the staff to do it, the ROI calculation really comes down to one or two things. How are you going to implement it in your practice? Meaning, is it something that you're advertising directly to your patients? Are you talking to them about it, like from your marketing message, your email news blast? Or is it something where you're training your providers to talk to every one of your patients who checks yes? Are you having pain today, 0 to 10? And if you look at it, whether it's direct to consumer or you look at it to your providers talking to the patients, you have to solve, well, what's the air quote point of sale? When does that process happen? Is it during your evaluation? Is it the second visit that they come back in? Do you talk about that with patients at their intake? Hey, we offer some services that aren't necessarily covered by insurance. What is the right timing? And you've shared with us, kind of on our episode, a little bit about how providers can do that. But then the next thing is, what's the cost of the device? How many sessions do you have to sell for the device to pay for itself? how quickly do you want to recoup that cost? Is it something where you're borrowing from a bank? Is it something where you're paying cash for the device? Really calculating that ROI depends on the mechanism of which you're paying for it, and then how you're delivering that to your patients and your business.
Yeah, very fair. I just want to share this to get your thoughts on this. In the
Yeah.
beginning, when we first did it, I was doing exactly what you mentioned, which was, okay, this device is, let's say it was $500 a month. If I sell one package or two packages, then I cover the cost.
It's
Over
a really it's a really bad model, because I made the same mistake.
horrible, right? So like today I evolved, and especially when we started working with Innovis and NewFit and some of the other companies, I asked the Ray Kroc question, which is, who's selling the most milkshakes? Buy the milkshake machines and let's go see what they're doing. And I was surprised that we had units that were maybe generating $6,000 a year, and like I was okay with that because that was the limit of the goal, the ceiling of the goal we had set. And then I would talk with an owner who was doing $150,000 a year. That's
Yep.
exact unit. And we just had like raving reviews, online reviews of people talking about whatever the treatment technology was. Have you gone through a similar process and evolution of thought from the break?
Yep. I used to think that even with my cash practice, I was like, if I can only make this much money per month, I'm going to cover my costs and I'm good. And that was my limit. Well, then I realized, well, I'm the barrier here. I need to get out of my way and say, well, how many of my patients coming through the door have pain? Well, the answer was about 82% of them. And that was the year that I kind of evaluated, well, 82 out of 100 patients walking through my door are having active pain today. Well, what's the number one indication for class 4 laser? Pain. And I started thinking, well, if I just talk to everybody about the benefits of using laser and we can get rid of their pain some today, would I buy that as a consumer? And my answer was immediately, well, of course I would. I'm in pain right now because every time I got tennis elbow from weightlifting, every time I got patellar tendonitis because I jumped into sand volleyball too quickly without loading appropriately, I was using the laser in the corner of the clinic, and I was like, oh, wow, this feels better. But then I wasn't selling it to my patients. So I started implementing that. And then I had to hire somebody full time to take over as my laser tech, because I could not see enough patients for PT care with laser care, because I started actually implementing, well, all these people have pain. I'm going to talk to them about the benefits of laser. And I'll even do their first session for free. I'll give them a trial session. I know you talked about don't say it's free, do a trial session, but I started doing the first visit and they're like, oh my goodness, like this is great. Be like, hey, it's $50 or $75, a session, buy a package of 10. It's $600. You can pay it on your way out, and you could come in 2-3 times a week and do that. We'll do your PT once a week. And patients did it. I think I had one patient push back on me for that next year. One patient who said, well, that's too much money. And it was a guy who had the means. He just was trying to be a little bit cheap. And I think I ended up giving it to him. I was like, you know what? I'll just do a couple sessions, and he felt better. So
That's great. Yeah, very, very similar experience here. Super cool. The next thing that I want to ask you about is mentorship. I know you
sure.
talked about this in quite a few spots. I think, and I'm just going to guess, you're not saying limiting beliefs, but I get the undertone that you've done some work there with Jim Quick, or probably, but you've done work on yourself in terms of removing your own limiting beliefs. This is something that's really plaguing our industry right now. How does mentorship
Yeah.
fit into helping you raise your ceiling as a clinician, as a practice owner? Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how you've progressed.
Yeah. So I'm going to share with you a story. Probably 3 years ago, I realized that I could not get to where I wanted to go on my own. I realized that I was the barrier, whether it was financially, I was afraid to make a risk, I was afraid to make a decision. And I had a friend, he said, I actually paid a mentor to help me. I was like, why would you pay somebody? That's a dumb idea. And he said, accountability. And then he threw me a book, and it was actually a book I mentioned. It's a Tribe of Millionaires. And it's this really like fictional narrative about true principles. And one of the principles is accountability is a very powerful force. And it's amazing when you have somebody every day asking you, have you hit your goal yet? Have you done this yet? Did you pick up the phone and call? Did you go to the bank and talk to them about a loan? It's amazing what that does for you. And one of the interesting things with that is I had a mentor. It was going to be like $30,000 a month. I know it's crazy, right? But there are some of these archetypes that are charging those monies, because they promise a result. They're like, I will get you to 10 million in sales or your money back, but it's 30 grand a month. I mean, there are people out there, and I found a guy and he said, hey, I want you to do a charity event. It's like, great, I'll do a charity event. He said, you need to raise $100,000 in 3 weeks. He's like, if you can do that, I'll take you on as a mentee. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. So one of my passions is I like supporting organizations that fight sex trafficking in our country. Indiana is actually the head of like Destiny Rescue and a few, very famous organizations that fight human trafficking. And I thought, well, that's my cause. And then I started texting all of my friends who I know like bourbon and whiskey. And I said, guys, we're going to do a bourbon exchange. You're going to get a bottle and you're going to give a bottle, but you got to do a $50 entry. And I'm going to have all these raffle bottles that you can win, and it's $5 a ticket. Well, we hit, $80,000, and I think somebody matched the 80,000. So we were at $160,000 thrown together in 3 to 4 weeks. Well, the mentor said, hey, that's great. I don't have time right now. And he didn't take me on as a client.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. But because of that, I was sitting very frustrated at a coffee shop and just kind of beside myself, went back to the drawing board, and I ran into a guy, formerly was a patient, and we started talking, and he told me about his new business, and it was really helping young entrepreneurs like succeed in that way. He worked in the not-for-profit space a lot, and it was just a huge blessing. But every week we have an accountability meeting, and he's helped me do that. Well, I do that in fellowship. I mean, I think I'm a fellow in manual therapy. I take on fellows. I've got fellows all across the country now. And it's a great model in terms of your clinical skills. But many practice owners, they don't have somebody they can call. Like, Chad, if you have a problem with your business, you make a rounding error and the IRS comes knocking on your door, who do you call?
Do you want to know the answer? Yeah. So, we have an accounting team.
Yep.
I grew up with 3 business mentors, and one was in the insurance business who passed away last year at 92. Another one has a huge roofing company, very successful. Another one was in commercial real estate. And I would just always run like, hey, here's the issue. This is how I'm thinking of solving it. What have you done? And I'm trying to learn from their experiences as well, and the principles that they're espousing, and put them into play. But I don't try to solve it myself. For sure.
Yeah, and I realized that some of my barriers as a solopreneur practitioner were really because of me. Is I wasn't asking the right questions. I wasn't going to the right people, or I kept saying, I want to grow and scale my practice, but I didn't want to spend money on growing and scaling my practice. I don't want to add shockwave because I have laser. I don't want to do this because I have this. And I realized I am the barrier. So I just started asking, and you don't even have to pay for a mentor. I mean, we don't have a paid product on our website with Torrentia. I'm encouraging practice owners to really look at, mentorship, and are there people that you can talk to? Look to thought leaders. I mean, I love what you and Carl are doing with Breakthrough, just with how you're helping providers around the country solve the marketing plague, as I call it. And helping providers navigate Google and navigate some of these big dog companies. So anywhere you can get, community, you can get people to bounce sounding boards, off of. That was one of the reasons why we created the Torrentia Tribe. Is I'm tired of like really expensive paid, mentorship groups, and there's really no added benefit. So we decided to just create a free tribe of providers that can bounce ideas off of each other. I mean, you get logged in, there's no paywall on that. We want people to have conversations that produce. I'm a practitioner in Lewiston, Idaho, and I'm struggling to market. How are you guys marketing? And then having 10 other providers jump in who've been there and are helping that provider figure out that question. That's why we created the Torrentia Tribe. So
love it. I have a lot of thoughts on that. Yes, I will validate most behind the scenes, most owners lead lives of quiet desperation, no hope,
yeah.
suffering alone, not really sure where to go to. The second thing, yeah, I'll get to that. The second thing is that I wanted to know from you: is there a practice owner story of somebody who was really struggling, who joined Torrentia and turned their practice around? Is there one that jumps to mind for you as like the most successful? And then I'm going to ask you how somebody can join as well. But yeah.
Yeah. So there was a individual, he's a private practice owner in a town of about 50,000 people. He was formerly a college basketball coach, and he was a little bit desperate. He actually came and took a dry needling course from me in Washington last year. And, he and I we just hit it off. He and I went out and had a beer after the course, just, had a conversation, and he was really down. I mean, he was like, man, like PT is just kind of going out of style. I think I'm just going to quit. I'm just going to quit. I'm done. And I was like, okay, and I really didn't defend the profession because I felt his points were valid because of the size of town he was in. He had a lot of barriers, right? Like I wasn't about to try to argue, some of those points in an hour-long meeting. Well, I was trying to think of people who could come to our think tank when we launched Torrentia. I was like, I need like 20 critics in a room. I need people who are going to rip this thing up and down. I invited physicians, like people who were like heads of regenerative medicine companies. Like I invited all of these people to just rip my course apart. And I invited this guy. I said, hey, why don't you come on down? He took the course. He loved it, shook my hand, thanked me, didn't hear anything from him. He called me the next week. He said, Ben, I was about to go to a job interview Monday at a bank and I was done with PT. He goes, I just called, a novice. I'm buying a laser. I'm buying a shockwave. I called a friend who's a pelvic floor therapist, and we're completely rebranding our practice as a regenerative medicine PT practice. And I was like, that's so cool, So I brought him on. Well, I had him on as a guest on one of our webinars. And by the time he came on, 6 months later, his schedule's full, his pelvic floor therapist schedule's full, and they're considering buying a second device of each of those for each other because their technology schedule's full, and he has hope again. He's excited about being a private practice owner again. And he loves it, so that's just one example. I mean, I probably have a dozen of those now with people, but they're finding that the value is the community. The technology is kind of a lifeline of, I don't know how I'm going to make more money in my practice. Reimbursement keeps getting cut more and more and more. Technology might be your solution staring at you in the face.
Yeah, agreed. You stole the words out of my mouth there with what you had said about hope, because I think most owners, that's exactly what they're looking for. Great story. The third thing that I wanted to ask you about was, so interesting. You had the viewpoint for yourself accountability, where you were willing to pay up to $30,000 a month for that, which is a very heavy commitment, right?
Yep.
And I've done the same thing in terms of, various groups that we belong to, coaches that we've belonged to. I think the most expensive though that I've gone is $10K a month, but have done that repeatedly over the years. It's been unreal. Like, trade that for the world. And so when you're, and then on the other side, you've had discovery, which very much parallels what I have, which is it's okay to do free information. How do you, and that's at Breakthrough, we put out so much free information, webinars, through all of our groups, through books, and just about, speaking engagements, anything across the board. We don't even charge for information anymore. And that's what we built the business in the beginning, was around education, billing for that. How do you balance that thought process of free versus paid and accountability? And what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that many of us are tired of doom scrolling. many of us are tired of being bombarded with the same ads on our social media channel. So anything that you can find that's valuable, follow Breakthrough, follow Torrentia, follow Kevin Wilkes stuff. I mean, look at thought with leaders in our industry and make that your doom scrolling, because I think there is a lot of really good content out there for providers and practitioners. That's more on the what I call casual learning side. Well, when you're a business owner, you have to be an expert in everything, especially if you're a small business owner. You don't have an accounting department. You don't have an HR department. You don't have a VP of ops. You don't have a VP. You don't, you don't have this massive network of people. You are the business. So a lot of times private practice owners are looking for all-in-one solutions, in terms of, who's going to do this? Am I going to do this? So really what I would say is have those casual learning opportunities, whether that's experts, thought leaders, et cetera. Look at individuals who you trust. Don't just trust everything that you see on ChatGPT. I'm seeing a lot of that in provider, people are now experts in things. They're just putting out whatever AI spits out for them. And it's dangerous because it's misinforming the public. It's misinforming individuals. But the third thing is money equals accountability for most people. Everybody can talk about real estate until they get their first commercial loan. When you have that commercial loan, you are really focused now on that business being successful. When you have a lease or you're practicing out of a gym, it's easy to just say, okay, sales are down this month, no big deal. But when you have that $5,000 a month loan, towards that business loan, your thought process changes. So as a consumer, I'm all for it. Give me everything I can for free. I have a friend, he has a company that does software for marketing, and one of the things he talks about is swipe, steal with integrity practically everything. you know, Take everything that you can for free. However, many times when you pay, it's not the information that you get necessarily that's the piece that's behind the paywall. It's the accountability piece inside of yourself. And even like, with the marketing solution too, like what you guys are doing with Breakthrough, it's easy for me to just say, well, I'm going to post on social media every day. But if that social media doesn't have purpose, then why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Is it driving the needs of your company? And that's where, well, if I pay a service or a software or an entity to do this for me, they understand my brand, my mission, what I'm trying to do is practice owners just have to see that there's value in why they're spending money. But for me, the value in spending money for mentorship and growth, et cetera, is because it's accountability for me. It keeps me to the grindstone when I want to be doom scrolling. It keeps me to the grindstone when I want to go out and just fish. And I'm not saying those things are bad, but when you're in startup mode, you have to be 7 days a week on all the time. And mentorship and talking with people who are experts gets you there so much faster because they've done it before.
Yeah, agreed. Great answer. What's the best way for our listeners to find Torrentia, get into the tribe, learn more about you?
Yeah, Torrentia.com. So pretty simple. It's like torrential rain, but without the L, just Torrentia.com. Because in healthcare, we're in a storm right now. So there's kind of all storm themed and brandedness we're all sitting in this right now. We all know that reimbursements are going down. We all know that cost for healthcare keeps going up. We all know everybody's time. People can't come in for 16 visits of PT anymore. And really, we created Torrentia to kind of be that calm in the storm of here's how you fix it. And here are all of the people who want to help you do that. Breakthrough, Anovis, other companies who it's like, these guys are also doing it. Here's the gambit. So Torrentia.com, click the free community button, email, name, you go in there, verify that you're a provider. So we just ask, are you, physician, dentist, PT, OT, et cetera. And then we have free community content that's on there. There's free live Q&As, free webinars. Everything we've recorded in the past is on there. There's some free lectures on there on shockwave and laser if you're interested in the science behind it. So we've got a lot of great resources for people.
Great. And we'll put that in the show notes for everybody, that link as well, just in case you can't spell torrential
without the L.
Yeah. And then final question for you. and this has been great, by the way, Ben. Nice job. What's the most influential book you've ever read that influenced you in life and or your career?
Yeah, I think there were two books. One I already mentioned, Tribe of Millionaires. But I would say probably the most was a book called Financial Freedom Book by Grant Sabatier. Grant now owns a bookstore in Columbus, Ohio, or just outside of Columbus. He hit millionaire status by 30. He was traveling Europe, and he writes about his story, and he was literally sitting in one of the most beautiful places in the world, and he's like, okay, now I have $1 million, now what? And he realized that he didn't have hope, he didn't have purpose, and he needed to find what that hope and purpose. Why is he doing what he's doing? Why is he living what he's living? And he maps out his financial journey. If your personal finances are not in order, highly would recommend you read that book. And most business owners, I know you're going from month to month, but looking at what's building a legacy, how do you build financial security? How do you borrow money safely? Like, his book answers a lot of those questions, but it's really for that person. And his new book is now called Interpreneur. But Financial Freedom Book, financialfreedombook.com. He's got tons of free tools, Roth IRA calculators, business valuation calculators. What does EBITDA mean? He's got all kinds of free training on there, but he's really been an influential person in terms of what got me sparked to do my own practice, what got me sparked to do Torrentia, what got me sparked, what gets me up, during the day, as he helped answer that question. So
Love it. And we'll link that in the show notes as well. Ben, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being on the podcast here. This is great.
yeah, thanks, Chad, so much for having me. Love what you guys are doing with Breakthrough. So thank you so much for doing that.